The world remembers heroes for the battles they win. But no one ever talks about the nights they cried alone, hiding the pieces of themselves that were breaking. This is the story of Jimuel Fuentenobro, a man who believed the world could be fair until life proved otherwise. It all began on a humid August morning in Pyotas, a place where hope was rare, but dreams were still stubborn enough to exist. Garbage trucks roared through the streets like clockwork. Stray dogs fought over scraps. And the smell of damp soil, mixed with burning plastic, made your eyes sting. Yet, in the middle of all this, Jimuel walked with purpose, a 27-year-old company driver with tired eyes and a heart far too soft for the world he lived in. Jimuel wasn't born lucky. He wasn't born rich. He wasn't even born into a family that stayed. His mother left when he was too young to remember her face, leaving behind only a necklace he kept hidden in his old wallet. His father, well, the man existed, but not in the ways fathers are supposed to. Most nights he returned home drunk, stumbling, cursing, or worse, breaking things. Jimuel learned early that silence was safer than speaking, and smiling was easier than explaining. But despite everything, carried a strange kind of light inside him. A softness. A calm. A belief that maybe, just maybe, he could build a life that didn't look like the one he grew up in. Every morning he knocked on his father's bedroom door and spoke. Gently pa. Nalago kamuna. Kapka. Papa sakna ko. Man rarely answered. Silence was the only language between them. Still, Jims, as his friends called him, would leave the house with hope tucked inside his chest until the day life changed its tone. It started with a stranger's voice shouting his name. Sir Jims. He turned around and saw a boy, probably 17, thin, sweating, panic burning in his eyes. See Sir Arthur Poe. Nagawala. Arthur wasn't just Jim's boss. He was the closest thing to a mentor he had. But lately, the man was losing himself, slipping into episodes no one understood. His laughter turned to breakdowns. His calm turned into tremors. Sometimes he screamed at shadows. Sometimes he spoke to people who weren't there. Back at Daw? Jims asked. The boy swallowed hard. Kazi. Iko doing sumisira sa buhay niya. The words hit Jim like a brick to the chest. People stared as he walked toward the scene. The sound of commotion echoing off the building walls. Sweat trickled down his neck. A strange tightness wrapped itself around his throat. Arthur stood in the middle of the hallway, shaking, pupils blown wide, his hands trembling violently. Nezan Sia, he shouted. Young traitor. Young Sumisira sa Pamilya Ko. Only when Arthur's wild eyes locked on him did Jim understand who the monster was, at least in Arthur's mind. Jims, Arthur whispered, then suddenly screamed, Eco. Jims froze. Dozens of thoughts ran through his mind. What did I do? Why me? What happened to you, sir? But he said nothing. He simply stood there, praying Arthur wouldn't hurt himself, before he could react. Arthur lunged toward him like a man drowning and reaching for anything to pull down with him. Two other officers held him back, trying to calm him. But Arthur kept shouting Jim's name like it was a curse, like it was a wound. People whispered. Cameras appeared from pockets. The world loves chaos, especially when it happens to someone innocent. Jimuel felt his lungs tighten, as if invisible ropes were pulling them shut. He wanted to speak, to explain, to defend himself. But what do you say when you don't know what you're being accused of? He took a step back, voice trembling, Kausapin, Neopomunasia. Hindiako. He never finished the sentence. That very afternoon, the company called him in. A small room, a cold table, a piece of paper that would decide his future. Sir Bowell, Po de To, Magsanungling. The woman on the panel said calmly, eyes sharp behind her glasses. Marin Po Teong proof, na-involved KOSA accusation. Parawala namin, Akong Jinagawa, your boss named you? The words felt like a knife pressed slowly into his chest. He wasn't fired. Not yet. But the silence that followed the meeting was louder than any dismissal. People who used to smile now avoided his eyes. People who once trusted him now whispered as soon as he turned his back. Rumors travel faster than truth always. That night, Jim drove home with shaky hands and a heartbeat that wouldn't slow down. His father was sitting outside, drinking again, the bitter smell of alcohol filling the air. "Batang yan," his father muttered, staring at nothing. "Puro kamalasan dalamo." The words sliced deeper than any accusation. Jim's wanted to scream, to run, to vanish, but he didn't. Instead, he sat alone in a dark corner of their small house, pressing his palms together as if trying to keep himself from falling apart. Everyone believed he was guilty, and the worst part? Even the one person who should have defended him chose to blame him instead. It was the first time Jimuel realized something horrifying. You don't need to do anything wrong for life to punish you. Sometimes, being in the wrong place with a good heart is enough, but that was only the beginning. What came next would push him beyond his limits, into fear, into betrayal, into a kind of pain that doesn't heal, until he discovered the truth hiding in plain sight. That night, Jimuel barely slept. His mind replayed Arthur's shaking hands, Arthur's wild eyes, Arthur's screams calling him a traitor. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that moment again, the hallway, the crowd, the shame burning through his chest. At 5 a.m., he dragged himself out of bed and washed his face with water so cold it stung his skin. His father was passed out on the sofa, an empty bottle rolling on the floor. Nothing new. Jim slipped out quietly. Outside, the morning air was heavy with fog. Manila was just beginning to wake up, jeepneys coughing to life, vendors opening stalls, the world moving as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. He arrived at the office early, hoping no one would notice him. But whispers have a way of finding their target. Ayan Young Sinasiguan, ni Sir Arthur Kahapin, Naku Kawawa Namon. Pero Baka Naman, May Janawa, Sabi Nila, Sia, Ra, Dahilan, Kaya, Nagakanyan, Si Boss. Jim swallowed hard and kept walking. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He didn't even look up, because he knew how it works. Once people believe a lie, truth becomes a guest no one invites. He headed straight to the dispatch room, keeping his head down until he heard the voice he feared the most. Jim. Arthur. Except this time. He looked different. Calmer. Tired. Confused, sir. Jim whispered. Arthur stared at him for several seconds, his brows furrowing as though searching his memory. May Janawa ba kita kahapin? He asked quietly. Jim felt his stomach drop. You shouted at me, sir? Arthur blinked. Talaga sinigo and kita? Jim nodded slowly. Arthur rubbed his temples. Hindi ko malala. Wala akong malala. The words were soft, trembling, and terrifying. Sir, may praba, po bakayo? Jim asked, voice shaking. Arthur didn't answer. Instead, he walked away. Just like that, leaving Jim with 1,000 questions. And a fear that maybe the man was losing more than his temper? Maybe he was losing himself. But before he could make sense of anything, the HR officer approached him. Mr. Fuentenabro. Required PO, KO, SA, admin room. Now, his stomach twisted. Here it comes, he thought. The end. He followed her down the hall into a cold room with papers stacked on a table. A man in a black polo shirt, someone from corporate, waited with a stern expression. Mr. Jimuel, he began. We're launching an internal investigation regarding the incident. Jim nodded. Double quotes, sir. Hunda Poa Kong, you are suspended for 7 days while we review the case. 7 days without pay. 7 days of being labeled guilty without even knowing the crime. Sir. Hindi Poba Pudang, the decision is final. The words slammed into him like a punch. He walked out of the building with empty pockets, a dry throat and a heart screaming inside his chest. He didn't want to go home. He didn't want to face the silence of his father. He didn't want to face the eyes of the neighbors. so he wandered through streets he didn't recognize. Past vendors selling fish and fruits, past tricycles honking at every corner, past people who had no idea their world hadn't just collapsed. He ended up on a bridge overlooking the river. The water below was murky and slow, carrying pieces of garbage that drifted like memories. He leaned on the railing, feeling the weight of everything, the lies, the humiliation, the fear, the confusion. Why would Arthur accuse him? Why couldn't Arthur remember? Why did the company choose suspension without hearing him out? Hindi ako, masamang dao, Jim whispered. His voice cracked. For the first time in years, he felt tears sting his eyes. But he didn't cry. He just breathed slow, heavy breaths that tasted like defeat, until a voice interrupted him. Kuya Jims. He turned. It was the same boy who fetched him earlier, the nervous assistant, probably still in training. May calling in Kong Malaman? Jim straightened. About what? He asked. The boy looked around, then lowered his voice. Hindi iko ang problema. Si Sir Arthur. Matagal na siyang ganyan. Kahapon lang lumela. At bago siya magwala. May nakasap siyang dao. Jim's pulse quickened. Sino? The boy hesitated. Isa Asa, MGA supervisor. Narinig ko. May pinakita rana papel. Parang document. Tapos bigla, na siyang, sumiga, inji pangalan, mo. A document. Someone showed Arthur something. Something that made him snap and accuse Jim. An on-Pangalan NG supervisor. Jim demanded. The boy shook his head. Hindi ko po nakita. Pero, may CCTV, SA hallway. Bakanan dun. Hope flickered in Jim's chest. Small but powerful CCTV footage could prove he wasn't involved. Could prove someone manipulated Arthur. Could prove he wasn't a traitor. Salamat, Jim said, gripping the boy's shoulders. Mahalagatong sanabi mo. The boy nodded, nervous but relieved. And for the first time since the incident, Jim felt the ground beneath him stabilize. He wasn't powerless. Not anymore. He rushed back home as the sun dipped behind the buildings, painting the sky orange and purple. His father was awake this time, bottle still in hand. San Kagaling. The man slurred. Jim didn't answer. Instead, he packed a small bag wallet. Documents, phone charger, the old necklace his mother left. For a moment, he stared at the necklace, feeling its familiar shape. Against his palm, he didn't know where he was going, but he knew he had to fight, even if no one believed him. Even if it meant facing the company. Even if it meant discovering a truth darker than the lie he was accused of. Because innocence means nothing if you stay silent. He stepped out of the house. The air colder now, the streetlights flickering like broken stars behind him. His father muttered, Wala kang, mapapala, Dion. Jim didn't look back. He walked toward the terminal, determination burning in his chest. Tomorrow, he would go back to the company, not as a suspect, but as a man ready to uncover the truth. A truth someone desperately wanted to hide. A truth that would shake the entire department. A truth that would expose the real culprit. And finally clear his name. But he had no idea the truth he was chasing was also chasing him. And what he would discover next would change everything. Asterisk. If you want to know what the CCTV revealed, who manipulated Arthur, and who was really behind the plan to destroy Jimwell's life, don't miss the full story. Comment full story, please, if you want the next chapter released immediately. And make sure to subscribe, because the next twist is darker, sharper, and more shocking than anything you've seen so far.